And excessive force, do you think HTS will eventually hit Israel back if they keep bombing them like last night? For some reason, I don't think they will. I mean, number one, they showed lack of willingness. They said we're not interested in war. Syria is a country that has faced 15 years of war. I mean, so many parts of the country are like Gaza, but on a massive scale. You need to understand what happened in Syria. The fact that, you know, there was like a temporary peaceful solution in 2019 or 2020 doesn't mean that Syria rebuilt itself. No, no, no. Economic disaster, political disaster, societal damage, healing the wounds, rebuilding, all of that. They don't need a war. And clearly that wasn't in their interest to go and have a war with Israel. So they're trying to contain it as much as possible. But the problem with that is, well, it shows weakness to your enemy and you'll get criticized if you're not having these firm statements. You know, I want to solve things diplomatically, but these people are invading your territories. Now, there's a difference, by the way, between having a critical thinking towards that and looking at it from a comparison view. For example, like some of the people who are saying, oh, look, HTS are not responding to Israel because they're occupying parts of Syria. Where were you in the over 50 years that al-Assad and his father were not firing a bullet on occupied Golan Heights, which are 100 times bigger than the territory that Israel is occupying now in Syria? Were you telling them, oh no, why are you not attacking Israel, you traitors, you sold the Golan Heights? They weren't. But because they're fixated on what Israel is doing now, oh, they're saying da, 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 da. But apart from this argument, by the way, look at it from a physical, a material perspective. What are the strong points of Syria? What are the strong points of Israel? Let's be serious. Is Syria, or the new Syrian administration capable or have the strategic missiles against Israel? Even if they're not that capable militarily, do they have a strategic weapon that they can attack Israel with or force Israel with? My answer is they actually may have. How? On the ground. No, you know, they don't have a lot of missiles. They have missiles, not to the levels of like Hezbollah or the Palestinian resistance, but they do have missiles. They have things to combat forces on the ground. But not the thing that they don't have in terms of strategic missiles is something that they will tell Israel, I'm going to keep pressing on you. For example, Hezbollah, their strategic missile with Israel was the drones and the missiles, mostly the drones. On the ground, if we're looking at it from an aerial perspective, on the ground, they're anti-tank weapons, they're heat-guided missiles, the Cornets, right? In Gaza, the 105, and the planted bombs, they were the strategic weapons for the Palestinian resistance. There's a different argument when it comes to Syria because the army they were fighting, or the Assad army, is no Israeli army. That's the difference here. And that could be seen as an excuse, or giving Israel an excuse to go on an all-out war in Damascus and take down the country altogether. On the other side, from an Israeli perspective and from a critical perspective, it's viewed as weakness. You're not responding. You're not even having these strong statements. You have a country here calling you a bunch of a gang of jihadist thugs, you know, and delegitimizing you. And all you're saying is, oh, I want diplomatic solutions. Do they believe? That's the question. Do they have a plan? Did they have a plan, for example, with Turkey to reach something to an extent, and potentially with other countries too, where they would have certain attempts up until they establish themselves and give Israel a deadline? Or are they just, is it just talk? My analysis of what's happening is I believe that what they're doing has been agreed upon from before. Why? Because if they immediately, let's say, for example, Israel invaded Syria on the first day that Assad collapsed, the weakest point of a country through such big changes, they immediately invade. If any of the armed groups immediately started to talk about Israel, what's the argument? Terrorist groups, right? prescribed by the United States, and they are gangs and they are illegal and they don't have a position of a state and. But things are moving and things are moving very fast. Now you have a transition government, you have a president, you have an army being established, you have a defense ministry, and you already have a defense ministry in a country saying that I want to have strategic relationships with multiple countries. And that first country or the first two countries would be number one, Turkey, number two, Russia, the same country that was supporting the previous administration. They're going to keep Latakia and Tartus, and they're going to remain with a strategic relationship with Syria, but in a stronger position. Why? Because Syria will have more territories. Under al-Assad, it was split into 3-4 countries for over 10 years. And again, the same people who are criticizing now and spreading all this propaganda haven't been saying a word about that from before. All they were saying is external conspiracies to protect al-Assad. So if they create this strategic tie, and if they have this strategic agreement, that means they can have technically a strategic pact with who? With a NATO member. A NATO member. If Turkey decides to have a strategic relationship with Syria, what is any Israeli attack on that country, its forces, it could raise problems with NATO. The same country and the same NATO countries that support Israel, by the way. It's very complicated, but you need to understand the role of Turkey here. Turkey is no ordinary NATO member, and Turkey is no ordinary country with its positions in the NATO. They refused to allow the US to attack Iraq from Turkey when they invaded Iraq. They have a solid relationship with Russia, the main anti-NATO country, strategic, and they wanted to, after they had escalations with them, at one point they took down a fighter jet of Russia, by the way, if you don't remember, about 9 years ago. And Erdogan then later apologized, and then there was a reconciliation. He even had scenes with Putin of them dragging seats from each other. It was like pathetic. But then they strengthened their relationship. What did that lead to? That led to a situation where Turkey feels like, oh no, hold on a second. I have a strong position. I'm a NATO member. I'm an ally of Western countries, but I'm also an ally of Russia. And I have my own interests and my own geopolitical interest with other countries too. Turkey is part of other, small country organizations. They view previous Ottoman Empire countries very important, or the Turkish people. They have had more progresses and coalitions with other countries too. So that would be very problematic. Let's say that country is having a military strategic pact or defense pact with the new Syrian state. You're no longer talking about Bashar al-Assad, and you're no longer talking about Iran in Syria, by the way. The Iranian presence in Syria was focused on Hezbollah. It wasn't focused on Hezbollah and preserving al-Assad up until they decided, I'm no longer going to support him. In Turkey, it's going to be different. Why? Well, they already have 50 fighter jets in Syria to protect Syrian airspace. That's number one. They are looking to supply, and they have already supplied the new Syrian army, in particular from the north, with more weapons now. They said we want to give them also, they want to provide the Syrian army with fighter jets too. Slowly giving them strategic missiles. But that takes time. And up until the Syrian state or the new Syrian state has this power or a strategic weapon that can last for months or years, like we saw, which is required if Israel decides to go in a very long war, they would need to have that before they battle Israel. So I believe there is a level of calculation. There's a level of calculation, but there's no denying that on the ground, Israel is trying to impose a new reality. Now, this imposing of a new reality and the statements of Israel are, how much do we take them seriously, and how much are they made for internal consumption in Israel? Well, you take them seriously because they have implications on the ground. That's number one. But number two, you need to understand what the internal Israeli society and Israeli critics are saying. For example, when they sent these brigades to Syria, all of a sudden they sent some of the elite brigades to Syria. The people in Israel started to say, and also people in the security establishment, you're sending the most advanced brigades to a place where no one is fighting you in farmlands, and you're sending the amateur brigades to Gaza with the fiercest war that we have, and they were still getting roasted in Gaza. Up until the final day before the ceasefire took place, the Palestinian resistance was annihilating them. They published 8 videos in approximately 2 days targeting dozens of terrorist IDF soldiers inside of Gaza. So people in Israel, when they saw these elite or special units going to Lebanon, to Syria, they were like, so what are you sending them to have fun, and sending these young amateurs to go and die? There was criticism. And what are we doing there? And what will happen if we have an escalation internally? Many questions. So by the way things are going, it's inevitably going to be, there's inevitably going to be something. The people in Syria are protesting. There's more popular demand to take action. And that's also something that people need to take into consideration. The popular request talks about forming new resistance movements, for example, that would deal with Israel and not the Syrian state. So the Syrian state is not viewed as liable, for example, like Lebanon, temporarily, or wait for the state to have a proper army, something strategic to target Israel with, and have the backing, or a defense pact, for example, with Turkey. And then they would say any war with us means a war with Turkey. And Israel, when they face real armies, they will run away. They will be running away. So all of that needs to be taken into consideration. And one thing's for sure, though, like I said, so long as that entity exists as it is and getting this impunity and support from some Western establishments, we will continue to have a problem. We will continue to have a problem. And Oms is saying also, do Gaza and southern Lebanon even matter to Zionists anymore? They seem more focused on dividing Syria with the Turks. Listen, the thing that's happening now is Israel, by the way, by what they're doing, are conducting a move that is as stupid as their decision to conduct a genocide in Gaza. Their decision to go on an all-out genocide in Gaza exposed them to the whole world. Zionism thrives in the dark, not under the sun. Now they're under the sun. Guess what? That sun isn't setting. It's not going to set. It's going to be there forever until they burn. Now what they're doing in Syria, instead of using a case in Syria to divide, because they're trying to divide, right? Instead of using this case in Syria to divide more between the people of Syria and Lebanon too, they know how much the new Syrian administration had feuds with Iran before and with Hezbollah. Although they started to talk about, we need a new era, we need to build new relationships, we need to forget about the past, we need to move on. Yes, some people are liable to be punished, but we need to build a better future. But Israel knows that. Instead of giving peaceful signs to Syria, they're giving hostile signs. All right. What are you doing exactly? What they're doing is showing everyone, including previous arch enemies in Syria, who are previously how the opposition was with Iran, Hezbollah particularly, and Russia. And we're seeing how that development is happening now, and certain reconciliations, a different tone, different understanding, even a different tone from Hezbollah themselves. And of course, Russia. Iran has more different tones too, to an extent. Some figures are still very anti the new government in Syria. But what Israel is doing is, well, it's uniting everyone. It's saying, I have a common enemy. So whether you are supporting al-Assad or you don't support these people, and whether you support Hezbollah or not, and whether you care about Palestine or Gaza, or if you don't care about anything, I am proving to the whole world that I'm the biggest problem. I occupy Palestine, I'm occupying parts of Lebanon, I'm occupying parts of Syria, and I'm being very aggressive against other countries too. Picking with Egypt, picking with Jordan, picking with Saudi Arabia. What are they doing? They are showing everyone that I am the problem, focus on me. And that's where the Arab leaders should, leaders of anywhere, leaders in Lebanon, leaders in Syria, leaders in Jordan, all of them need to have a solid new approach. You have your problems, you put these problems aside, you focus on the main problem and unite yourselves on that main problem. And that main problem in that region is called Israel. Get rid of that problem, and any problems between yourselves, they are problems that can be resolved. Because guess what? The fate of the people are to be together, despite all of the differences, despite the history and despite the problems and the wars. But there's someone constantly causing more problems, and that side is Israel. If they don't have that approach, they will constantly face the same problem, if not even more problems, by the way. Do you think that the Zionist greed ends in Syria and in Lebanon? No, that Zionist greed extends to Saudi Arabian territories, parts of Iraq, Jordan, and Egypt. Everyone needs to understand that. So the quicker that happens, the better it would be. And we can see an indication in the coming Arab summit. We will understand if the Arab leaders are the same Arab leaders as before, going to a summit just to have lunch and sleep and go back, or are they going to be actually moving towards making a solid decision? Because guess what? What happened on the 7th of October showed that a fraction, a very small number of people who are brave enough to stand for this paper tiger called Israel can destroy it. The genocide soldiers, the Gaza division, they were running away like rats when they were faced with men coming to them. Everyone should learn a lesson from that. And all of the genocide and bombardment and destruction of Gaza was intended to cover up that military failure and military humiliation of a whole division in the Israeli army being taken down in 2 hours, with many of them being taken as prisoners of war in Gaza. The Arabs should understand, the Arab states, are you going to sit there and wait, watching, and wait for the moment where your real enemy surprises you? Or are you going to take that initiative and actually surprise them and shock them maybe at one point and stop waiting, because you all know that you're next in line? There are very important questions that the Arab leaders need to consider, regardless of their differences and regardless of their internal differences and regardless of their internal feuds and internal history.